Good day. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. It's Wednesday, November the 2nd, 2022. We've got CEO Julia Stamberger of the Planting Hope Company joining us today. The Planting Hope Company develops, launches, and scales innovative plant-based and planet-friendly food and beverage brands to the consumer and food service industries. I'm very pleased to have Julia join us today. The Planting Hope Company is a fast-growing company with last quarter's revenue increasing over 270% to $4.2 million Canadian. The company's flagship product, Hope and Sesame, a sesame milk product that has won numerous awards and is gaining good traction and awareness in the marketplace. I like the strategy the company is using to drive adoption and awareness through the barista and coffee shop channel to help drive end user demand at grocery level. The company is comprised of well-seasoned executives in the food service, and CPG spaces. I'm looking forward to understand how the company plans on continuing expanding its distribution over the coming quarters and years to drive ongoing growth. While the CPG space is highly competitive, I do like that large CPG players love to buy out young, fast-growing brands that have found a niche and can fulfill the big brand's need for high-growth, differentiated products. But please remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Thanks for joining us, and please tell us about the Planting Hope Company. Julia?
Well, Martin, thanks for the opportunity. I'm pleased to be able to tell everybody more about us and what we're up to. So the Planting Hope Company was founded in 2016 by four of us who are long-term players in the emerging food and beverage space, careers spanning anywhere from 20 to 45 years at this point in time. And we've been a part of the movement of growing better-for-you plant-based brands and non-plant-based brands, frankly, across the natural and better-for-you sector. In 2016, we founded this company specifically to focus on creating the world's most nutritious and planet-friendly plant-based food and beverages, but specifically to fill key holes in the marketplace with one of the largest opportunities for pantry staple products. And pantry staple products are those products that households use every day. So they have big velocities, big turns, and big needs. We have four brands today that are in the market and growing. The first one, as you mentioned, is our Hope and Sesame Sesamemilk, and we have creamers on deck for 2023. So our Hope and Sesame milk is really unique in that it is made from the sesame seed. And there are very few products that are eaten every day for nutrition that come from sesame. It's an incredibly nutritious product, but it's very hard to work with because it's an oil seed. We spent about 5 years on R&D on sesame milk to create what's really the world's first commercialized sesame milk. And it's a product that is nutritionally identical to dairy milk, and it's also extraordinarily sustainable. Our Mozaics Real Veggie Chips take the concept of a snack that you can eat every day, but we put real veggies in the chips as the number one ingredient. You can see them in each pop chip. They're low in calories, and they actually deliver protein and fiber from those chips as you eat them. So it functions as a salty snack, but is actually good for you as well. Our RightRice Veggie Rice is our first acquisition. We completed this at the beginning of January of this year. And RightRice is unique in that it effectively replaces long grain white rice with a grain that is 90% vegetables. So it's taken the concept of rice and beans, often eaten together at the same meal to provide a complete protein, and merged them into a single grain that's very easy to prepare. You just add water and wait 10 minutes, and it functions extremely well at food service as well, which is why you'll see it on the menus of Cava restaurants and recently announced Roti restaurants, fast casual Mediterranean concepts in the US. And then our Veggicopia Veggie Snacks allow you to really just take veggies to snack anywhere you go. So we have individual bags of brine-free olives that are packaged where they're grown in Greece, single-serving dip cups where we perfected the technology for a serving of hummus to have 24-month shelf life without refrigeration, with recipes that we developed in partnership with a Michelin star chef and taste as good or better as refrigerated options, but with 24 times the shelf life and no refrigeration. All of our products are established and scaling with major retailers in North America. We started with the US, we're based in Chicago, But we have announced starting in Q2 that we were going to bring a dual language Canadian compliant packaging to the Canadian market. In Q3, we started our first production of these products, and in Q4, we're starting to announce major distribution within the Canadian markets to bring Open Sesame, Mozaics, and RightRice products to retailers near you. So watch this space, and you can always sign up for our press releases on our website, plantinghopecompany.com. So every time we update this deck, it's immediately out of date. Currently, we're in 8,000 plus grocery doors. That's over 9,000 now. And 50,000 distribution points is closer to 58,000 at this point in time. We're growing very quickly, and they're with the important retailers. Whole Foods, Kroger, Sprouts, distributors like UNFI and KeHE, Amazon on the e-commerce side, and all sorts of others in between. We're headquartered in Chicago. We have about 26 employees at this point in time, and the majority of our employees have a very deep experience specifically in the food and beverage space.
Julia, when you started the company, did you already have the Sesamemilk idea? You saw, I guess, a hole in that space, or like, did you have the product or the concept and then, okay, let's start a company to launch it? Or was it more, we see some opportunities here in the milk, in the non-dairy milk space. Let's start a company and try to find something there. How did that start about?
Yeah, so what we saw that was the emerging trend, and first of all, we're serial entrepreneurs. We're ready for our next venture. But what we saw really emerging was this idea of the flexitarian in the market coming to dominate the way that humans consume food. Flexitarian is very simply this: people who are opting to select more plant-based proteins and plant-based products and bring them into their diet. They are not abandoning animal products wholesale. This is not the rise of the vegan. This is the rise of the flexitarian. So for all sorts of reasons, whether that be nutrition benefits, food for wellness, whether that be sustainability, animal welfare, allergies, there are a lot of reasons why consumers are opting to make these trade-offs. And as such, more than 50% of the planet at this point describes themselves as undertaking this behavior. So we saw that growth, but we also saw some of the big sectors were deficient in things that were important in those trade-offs. For instance, in the plant milk sector, it's more than 42% of the grocery market is in the plant-based milk, so it's more than double the size of plant-based meat. People were leaving dairy milk, which is extremely nutritious, but has issues with sustainability. And frankly, about 70% of humans are allergic to dairy on one level or another in terms of a lactose intolerance or total allergy. So there are many reasons that people were kind of leaving plant milk, or was leaving dairy milk, sorry, but they were going to plant milk. And the biggest segment of plant milk is almond milk. And almond milk, sounds healthy, sounds good for you, but, there are very few almonds in almond milk. And in fact, if they put enough almond milk for the almonds in almond milk for almond milk to have the same amount of protein as in dairy milk, it would be more than, $10 a liter. It wouldn't be something that would fly off the shelf. As a result, almond milk has less than a gram of protein per serving, and it's really effectively flavored water. Yet consumers were, really adopting the plant-based alternatives, thinking they were better for them. Almond milk is also not great for the planet. It takes a lot of water to cultivate almonds and almond trees. And, the bee population is decimated by almond farming every year, with about 30% of the total population being killed off by aggressive needs for pollination in the almond groves. So we saw consumers really adopting and embracing plant-based products, but the options that they were being provided and the trade-offs just weren't great nutritionally and weren't great from a sustainability option. We thought we could do better. So, always been fans of the sesame seed. It's very nutritionally dense. It, thrives in desert climates with very little water. It's often used as a cover crop and rotated with cash crops like cotton that pull nutrients out of the soil. The sesame can replace those in the soil. So it's a great, functioning agricultural crop, and it's naturally pest resistant, all sorts of things that you'd love. One of my co-founders had made sesame milk in his, kitchen as a hippie back in the 70s. We weren't the first to conceive of making milk from sesame seeds, but we tried that, and it is not commercializable. Sesame is an oil seed, so you can make something from home use that'll last in the fridge for a couple of days, but it's very hard to take sesame seeds and turn them into a drinkable product that is an alternative to milk in terms of how you use it in recipes, drink it, or consume it.
I would
So,
also,
yeah.
sorry, I'd also
Go
guess
ahead. Yeah.
from like sesame oil, which we cook with here at home, it's got such a strong flavor. Is trying to figure out how to deal with that that strong flavor profile is probably a bit of a challenge as well.
So what we use as a building block is we actually upcycle the pulp remaining from sesame oil extraction. So the sesame oil is pulled out of the pulp, and the pulp is where all the nutrition sits. The protein isn't carried in the oil. A lot of the taste is carried in the oil. The pulp that's remaining, tastes like sesame, but one of the more challenging things to overcome is actually the bitterness associated with the sesame seed. If you've ever had straight tahini, which is milled sesame seeds, you'll notice that they taste kind of bitter.
Yeah.
If you put it into hummus, you don't taste that bitter now. A very little amount of spice or flavoring or acid or sugar will cover that up. But here was our challenge. The largest part of the non-dairy milk market, or the plant-based milk market, is unsweetened. Now, there isn't a good analog for unsweetened in the dairy industry because all dairy milk has some level of sugar in it. Unsweetened plant milks are a very large category because they do something that other things don't. And they're very functional from a culinary standpoint, but they don't add sugar to products. So although we do have sweetened varieties where we have cane sugar in those, we also really wanted to make sure that we could create a great unsweetened product. People don't expect sesame to be bitter because it's not kind of how we use sesame mostly. The hulls are removed from the seeds, they're toasted, they're roasted, they're in oil. So we actually developed organic compliant bitter blocker ingredients that are natural, but they float the bitter note over the tongue for most people. So, there are all sorts of little, things about sesame that we had to work with. Some of them were related to taste, but not necessarily what you'd expect.
All right. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit more about, what we're doing as a business standpoint. We made a very conscious decision after we had done quite a few years of R&D and development to go public. And to go public on the TSXV. We're a small company, but we wanted to be able to access retail investors because retail investors, for us is analogous to a consumer. Every consumer could be a retail investors. Retail investors can be consumers. For food companies, it's different than investing in a mining stock. You're not going to go kick the tires or ask to see the ore. But, from our products, people can try them at the grocery store, decide if they like them or not, and that may motivate them to invest. It may, if they don't like them, it'll pull them out of it. It's a unique thing to be a food company that's public. So we spent quite a few years developing the R&D and the technology behind our products, because make no mistake, every product that you produce and take to market has a form of technology. Recipes are technology. Processing is technology, and from our perspective, it was important to get the right products. You can execute on a B or C level product and get it to market and sell it if you've got an A level management team. But, an A-level management team plus an A-level product that tastes really good, is a great recipe for success. So we made sure that we had products that tasted great, had unique innovation behind them, and as much proprietary innovation as possible so we could create an effective moat. The challenge in the food industry is you can't really patent anything. As soon as you publish something, somebody could tweak an ingredient and go to market with the same thing. That's why, like Coca-Cola, the formula is a trade secret. It's not patented. Pepsi does a similar product, but it's not the same. It tastes different. So does RC. And that's kind of how the food industry works. So we did things like ensure that we were white labeling proprietary ingredients and other things together to make sure that we had an effective moat. And also got all of our consumer branding and packaging and things dialed in. We made decisions during COVID around our supply chain where we saw that, for instance, organics were really taking a hit in terms of supply chain timing and how long it was taking them to get to market. In some cases, we changed to non-GMO from organic, but then also incorporated sustainable packaging. Our Mozaics chips have a sustainable packaging film, neoplastic, that will degrade in any waste stream. without additional handling. So you can throw them in the trash and know that this packaging will degrade on its own. And if it's in a landfill, it actually releases a harvestable biogas that can be used as a clean energy source. So we got all of this ready to go into the IPO with the intention of scaling and executing on an aggressive business plan for growth after we completed the IPO. And thus far, we've done it. So, last year, cumulatively, we did about $2.5 million in gross revenue US. By, April of this year, we had exceeded our revenues for the previous year. We announced in Q2 that we'd done about 5.9 million US, and we predict, continued growth and scaling ahead as we keep having these, record-breaking quarters for our company. We are seeing the momentum start to fall into place around everything that we're doing. There's a flywheel effect where, retailers, food service operators are contacting us. Consumers are pulling the products off the shelf. We've also ensured that we take an omnichannel approach so that we are in multiple channels simultaneously, because this reinforces the consumer trial and the opportunity, as well as reduces our overall costs of getting consumers to do so. For instance, if we're in the food service channel, our RightRice product is available in Cava restaurants throughout the US. Countless consumers have told us that they first encountered RightRice at Cava restaurants, and then they went to Whole Foods and started buying it to use in their own homes. Similarly, with our Hope and Sesame Sesamemilk, we spent a couple of additional years developing and perfecting a barista formulation. Why a barista formulation? Because that's where oat milk came from. You notice that oat milk wasn't here one day and then it was everywhere. Well, in 2016, Oatly came to the market with a well-developed product that they'd marketed in Sweden for 20 years. And they introduced it to cafes, and the cafes loved it because they've been getting rising demand for plant-based options from milk. And really all they had to provide consumers for their vegan lattes were almond milk and soy. Neither one of these are optimal in coffee beverages. They have strong tastes. Almond milk is like flavored water, so it froth, foams, and steams like water, just not very effective. Oat milk had a mild flavor associated with it. Oat milk is also naturally extremely sweet because the enzymatic process used to create most oat milks breaks down the natural sugars in oats, which is why if you look at the ingredient list on oat milk, you may not see sugar on the ingredient label, but you'll see added sugar in the NFP when you look at the nutrients. Maltose is created through that process, much as high fructose corn syrup is created through enzymatic processing of corn. So, it tasted good and it worked well, and consumers started drinking it in their lattes, and then they went to the stores and said, hey, I want oat milk for use in home. And the retailer said, oh, we're getting demand. I guess we better get, oat milk in. So similarly, we are going to the baristas with sesame milk that performs froth, foams, and steams, as well as oat milk or better, as well as dairy or better. And that product, since we launched it at the end of Q1 of this year, has received, at this point, I believe 6 major industry awards, everything from the World Plant-Based Foods Association through to most recently Good Housekeeping has given us award for the best product or best creamer. And the reason is it tastes great in coffee, and it really froth, foams, and steams like a dream. So, as we enter those markets, we're creating demand for sesame milk, while at the same time, food service is a great channel in terms of revenue, cash flow, paying on time, paying in full, where grocery can be a very expensive channel to develop because of slotting fees, because of promotional requirements and the rest. So taking a hybrid approach, multi-channel, actually reinforces the ability for our brands to grow and get exposure to consumers, as well as hedges and reinforces our cash flow and does all sorts of other great things for the business.
All right.
So we uniquely have an all-women board of directors. We did not know that that was unique when we went public. We found out soon afterwards through folks saying, hey, haven't seen that before, that it is fairly unique. We also have an all-women C-suite. But strategically, one of the reasons we did that is because our primary customer is a woman. everybody eats food, but the people that are adopting these new plant-based products and bringing the innovation into their home to share with their families, to influence, they influence their friends. These are primarily a female consumer. So I said, well, if that's our customer, we should look like our customer so that we can understand and lead there. So the market within North America is very large for plant-based foods, and you're seeing that growth across a lot of different categories. By far, the biggest categories are the ones that we're playing in with our products. But outside of the US and Canada, the market is even larger globally. And these trends are on fire in places like Europe and Australia and in Asia. And we're just seeing this is where food is going. And we are smack dab in the middle of that in the largest categories with innovative products that have very high consumer usage and velocity. So we've talked a bit about these different milestones that we've gone on, but the key ones to recap, we did raise a bit over $10 million Canadian in our IPO, which was just under a year ago, November 18th of last year. We did a secondary financing in March of about 8 million CAD, and not on here yet is we closed a convertible note for 2.2 million CAD about 2 weeks ago. And in the end of July, early August, we received our OTCQB listing with DTC eligibility as well. And we're looking ahead to a future uplisting on the NASDAQ in the world ahead, which we may be on a faster path to than we initially expected. So here is kind of a full suite of our brands and products. On Hope and Sesame, we have 7 different products that are packaged in aseptic packaging. This is the Tetra Pak recyclable cartons. This is shelf stable, does not require refrigeration, can be drop shipped on e-commerce, and we're producing 4 of these items for the Canadian market with dual language packaging. Our refrigerated product is currently just sold in the US in refrigerated sections. Why refrigerated? Grocers require refrigerated packaging to go into the perimeter, which is where milks are usually sold in a refrigerated state. They won't put the Tetra Paks in that, so we need to have packaging that requires refrigeration in order to play in that high velocity category. In RightRice, we have multiple product lines and flavors, including for the holiday time. We actually have 2 special SKUs out just for the holiday season, including a brown butter sage, again, completely vegan and plant-based. And we also have a holiday stuffing flavor as well. And those are just limited for the holiday season.
Is the pumpkin spice flavor on the menu for next year? Everything else is pumpkin spice flavor.
We have talked about it, and we actually did look at that. It is harder to make a great tasting pumpkin risotto than you might think. We did try that. And of course, we've developed quite a few great tasting pumpkin spice hot and cold beverages, including a boozy version, if you'd like to try a Hope and Sesame cocktail.
All right.
And then on Veggicopia, not only do we have our, single servings dip cups, which we're seeing enormous interest in, particularly in food service, where, folks are kind of pulling their hair out with the fact that, refrigerated dip cups from folks like Sabra have less than 30 days of production. By the time they get down to distribution, maybe they've got a couple of weeks left. There's very high levels of shrink. So we're seeing very high demand there. And then we have plans to expand that technology into additional flavors and opportunities. Our olives, you wouldn't believe how these crank, top sellers on Amazon, QVC, and other places. Our Mozaics chips, we have in 3 core flavors. All of these are now available in Canada. And then we're adding what we call vegan dairy flavors next year. And here's a sample of our Canadian packaging.
With the with your targeting of the food service and coffee barista markets, do you sell the the Tetra Pak non-refrigerator products to them?
Yeah, so that's critically important strategically and operationally. We started looking at that market. We went in and talked to some cafes, and they're like, look, we have very, very small footprints in terms of the size of the cafe as well as storage. And we have very limited refrigerated storage. Like we have plant milk brands coming in here all the time trying to sell us the refrigerated product. We can't take it. We have nowhere to put it. Like it has to be shelf stable to work in this channel, period, operationally. So that's actually really important to the food service channel. And that's across, not only cafes, but also one of the, interesting things about RightRice going into food service is it's a dry product. We have 20-pound and 50-pound bulk packages of RightRice that we ship into food service, and it's dry just like grains of rice. Cauliflower rice, which is tried to be the next plant-based rice alternative or grain alternative in a lot of QSR space, is not dry, it's frozen. So you have to, take it through a frozen supply chain. You have to slack it to thaw. It has a short shelf life as a result. So these operational pieces are critically important to success in these channels.
All right.
So again, we keep adding banners all the time, and this slide will continue to change and evolve, but we're getting great placements with the top retailers, across North America, and great relationships there.
Sorry, going back to the other slide, you mentioned slotting fees and promotions and so forth. The grocery business is expensive to get into. With you're saying you're receiving calls from buyers saying, "Hey, we're interested in the product." When they're calling you, does that give you a little more leverage when negotiating those slotting fees, or those kind of hard written into their tablets of what you gotta to do to play with on their shelf space?
I wish I had a silver bullet to get rid of those fees. Here's how the retailer looks at them. The time that it takes them and the labor cost and the rest to take another product off the shelf, because there's not empty real estate. When you go to a store, it's not like half empty. You're displacing something.
Yeah.
So they have to wind down an item to open the slot. And then they have to take the time and effort to put you on, change the shelf tags, do all of that to get you that position. That they consider to be their investment. Your investment is providing, typically in the form of what's called pre-fill, one case of product per store per SKU. That's one of the many reasons, by the way, that retail store cases are small. I think our RightRice case, for example, is 6 units, because it's tend to be done in a unit of a case. If you have 6 units in a case, then you're providing 6 units free of charge. If you have a 12-unit case, you're providing more units free of charge. There are other reasons that drive case size, but that's one of them. So, it's typically not something you're going to get around very easily, but also, once you make that investment, it takes about 6 months after you go into a retailer for you to start, making, transactionally profitable business, sometimes as long as 12 months to actually clear that. But the idea is that once you get that real estate, it's yours to keep. You make that investment once. You're not recharge slotting every year. It's a single investment to cover those transition costs. And then it's yours until you lose it. And to keep it, you have to keep a minimum threshold velocity with that retailer, which differs by category. And there are a lot of factors around it, but it's what we call units per store per SKU per week. So that's the number of units of a particular flavor or SKU of product that sells through a single grocery door on average on a weekly basis. And as long as you meet that threshold, you keep that space and you don't have to pay for it again.
Getting it on the shelf is half the battle. Then you got to make sure the consumer actually picks it up and takes it off the shelf, so you get your velocity and your revenues. What are the ancillary kind of marketing promotional type things that you're doing to gain customer awareness, so that at least they try it the first time and then hopefully keep buying it?
There are a lot of ways to spend a lot of money and not get very far on that in retail. Lots. A lot of stores want you to sign up for their digital couponing programs and other things that some consumers use, others don't. Some promotions are very effective, like end caps, where they take product and they put it on the end of the aisle to highlight that product in large volume. So the consumer walking by says, "Oh, look at that. It's a new product. I haven't tried it. It's on sale. I can't miss it." That helps to separate you from the pack. And that's worth doing. But what we try to do is, as much as possible, we like to use our other revenue accretive channels to drive trial and awareness wherever we can. And as an example, we have 3 product lines now that are regular return products on QVC. It is really hard to get a sticky product on QVC. It is not easy. Over a 10-year period, I probably launched 4 or 5 different products on QVC. And when I got trained, presented myself, they all had 1 airing. And with QVC, you're measured on dollars per second that you sell. They have it down to a science. And there are millions of consumers watching each segment.
And
Well,
sir, just in case, like QVC is like shopping TV, where someone's there showing, we got to try this, it tastes great, it looks great, whatever, and then you dial a number, go to the app, and place an order for it, right?
Absolutely. And for us, it provides an 8-minute infomercial every time we air. So we make money selling products to consumers. And again, not all products work, but if you get one that works, 2 of our products were voted customer favorites last year. These are products the QVC consumer can buy through QVC and get a special product configuration or special pricing or something with that specific product. But you can also buy most of those products at a grocery store. In our case, some products you can't, but the products we sell in QVC, they could also buy at a local grocery store, in a different configuration or a single bag or whatever it is. So for us, every time we're on air, we have an 8-minute infomercial where we market our products to millions of consumers who can also buy them in the stores. We make money selling the products on QVC. They're not huge net margins, but they also are free advertising. The same that we're doing with the Kava restaurants and RightRice, the same that we're doing with Barista, the Sesamemilk, and independent cafes. We're introducing customers and driving trial in a way where we're also making money to support our grocery distribution.
You part of that, do you do sampling programs? Like I see Costco there. Costco's always given out the little samples to taste, and maybe not so much in regular grocery stores, but that's still part of the promotional activities. I think for a product like yours, that could maybe make a lot of sense.
It can, but here's kind of how the demo that cuts. It's called demoing. And during COVID, they were out. Now they're back. You're absolutely right. That is an important part of doing business at Costco. With regular retailers, if you think about the thousands of doors that we're in and the cost of executing a demo, you may see, you run a 2-hour demo. It costs you $200 for that 2 hours. You may encounter, 20 consumers, over the course of that period. They're not necessarily, maybe you see 100 consumers, right? Maybe it's a busy day, but they may try the product. They may also not connect it back to pulling a product off the shelf and putting it in their cart. One of the ways that if we're going to invest in driving trial at retail, there are some interesting new programs that do things like that, but do it in a different way. There's a program that we work with, for instance, where we effectively pay for them to target a panel of consumers who fit a specific demographic profile. Let's say it's Kroger customers, who shop in this particular demographic area or geographic area where we know we have products in distribution. And we offer that panel the ability to opt in to a coupon for a free product that they redeem at the grocery store. So they go to the grocery store, they redeem the coupon, they try the product, and then they have to write a review about the product online. So, if we're paying, let's call it on average $7 to get that customer and to pay for the product that gets, that the coupon comes back to us for that redemption value, it's $7 to trial a customer. We know that they've tried it, they've taken it home, they've done a review, they've had a full bottle of milk to try or whatever it is. Whereas from a demo standpoint, let's say that we even see, 100 people, that costs us $2 for every person that tries the product. They may try it in passing. They may not actually buy a product. We may not actually get the sales for that. They're not taking a full bottle home and trying it, and they're not writing a review. So effectively, there are ways to spend money where we're ensured that we encounter the product and the customer, and we get the credit for the sale and everything else. And so, it's a better use of funds to get that trial than standing in the aisle and getting somebody who hasn't opted in to be one of your customers. Through this panel, we're able to ensure that these are people who have self-identified as fitting the demographic needs that we've sorted out, and they go to the store with a coupon in hand, intending to buy our product rather than being intercepted on the store floor.
Gotcha. All right.
So different ways to get to the result. But we feel that, a better use of spend because of what we get out of it. And by the way, those reviews are then ours to keep, and we syndicate them on our website and other things, and we get feedback from consumers about products. So, okay, so we've talked quite a bit about sesame milk and a bit about how, we fit into the overall category. We've talked about the sustainability and about our proprietary formulations and about the barista industry.
Sorry,
Yep.
I don't know, you said ready to scale a couple of slides back. I presume you
Yeah.
don't have your own food manufacturing facilities. You use contract manufacturers to make and manufacture the foods for you. So that's you don't have to spend $10 million on a new factory as you expand.
Well, we don't have to spend $10 million. We don't have to wait 18 months for that, to be up and running. We don't have the management distraction on growing that. And, when you turn on a factory, you're never at full capacity on day one. Typically, then you would have to go out and get other people to manufacture for, and you'd be in the co-manufacturing business yourself. So no, we do not own our own manufacturing. And that actually helps us to scale faster. It conserves our resources and focuses them in on execution. And it is something that we're well versed in that type of scaling. Actually, our COO ran her own co-manufacturing operation in ancient grains, serving Fortune 100 clients for over 20 years. We know the ops space inside and out, and this enables us to get best-in-class manufacturing across all of our brands so that we can scale quickly and scale well.
Is there any risk outsourcing that with your proprietary formulas and that which you don't want, you spent 5 years developing to keep that proprietary, or is there any sort of chance of leakage when third parties have that?
There's always a chance of leakage in anything. You could have an employee that leaves your organization and goes rogue and, takes confidential information with them, even though you've got an NDA in place. But co-manufacturers are, in this, working with the top retailers on private label, working with the top brands and things. It is very counter, not at all positive to their reputation if they go and start ripping off trade secrets and sharing them with people. So co-manufacturers who do that, we have it's not just us who have these requirements. If they're working with Frito-Lay, they've also got similar requirements. So they do a great job of typically managing, informational walls within their organization to be able to keep proprietary things proprietary. And if there's something that we consider to be especially proprietary, like some of our ingredient blends, we'll have those actually white labeled and blended offsite and sent in as a whole ingredient. And so that, folks can't reverse engineer those, et cetera. So we take all the common sense steps that we can to protect that IP and information. But you have to be a pretty amateur co-manufacturer to think it's a good idea to, step on your client's toes.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned like white labeling or private labeling a couple of times now. Is that part of your strategy just to kind of ramp up the exposure of sesame milk and to get volumes and so forth, or are you staying away from that?
Well, it's not something that we really drive in some ways. Now, we did just start selling to a company that's using RightRice in white labeled recipes, for instance. That's something that we've embarked on. But, in terms of sesame milk and creating a private label interest in that, that's something that comes from category development. What happens in the private label arc for retailers is they watch all these categories to see if they're developed to the point where consumers are adopting them, and it makes sense to bring in, a more value brand, because private label is always a value brand underneath those brands to drive additional volume. So, at some point when we've established sesame milk as a large category at retail, there will be strong private label interest. And those retailers prefer typically to work with the category leaders to create their private label products. So we will likely get there at some point, but retailers are not interested in jumping the gun and going into innovation too soon before it's proven, because it doesn't make sense for them from an economic standpoint.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So if we do our job well, eventually we'll be in the private label business.
It has to be a high volume product for them to go through the process of putting extra shelf space in the white label capacity.
Yeah, because remember, all the shelf life comes from shelf space comes from somewhere. And so
Yeah.
they have to take something else off the shelf, and then they're investing their own dollars. It's their own packaging, it's their own inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different level of risk and opportunity.
All right.
So one of the other things that we've been seeing with sesame milk in general is a lot of media interest too. So we're getting picked up on by all sorts of media outlets as this is the next new thing. And folks, frankly, have been looking for what is the next new thing after oat milk to come into this industry. And a lot of bets are being placed on us. So we look forward to fulfilling that promise. So there's quite a bit of information here. If folks watching this have interest, that is available on our website. This whole presentation is available on our website. We go into quite a bit on the plant-based foods categories, and you can see kind of how these are growing, how quickly they're growing, how they're growing vis-a-vis other things like plant-based meat and other players within this category, the reasons that people are becoming flexitarians and where that desire is, and how quickly this is being adopted. So, this statistic, 50% of coffee drinkers in the UK ask for a non-dairy milk when ordering in a cafe. This statistic came from about a year ago. We're about a year behind the UK in this development. Now, independent cafes are saying that 50% of their coffee drinkers are asking for non-dairy milk in their lattes. So again, this is growing faster overseas than it even is in North America. Is there opportunity for disruption? Absolutely. This category is evolving quite quickly. In the 90s is really when plant milk started to come out of natural food stores and hit more of the mainstream. Soy milk was first and really dominated the category. Rice milk had been there for a while. Rice milk is pretty dead just because, nutritionally, there's not a lot there. Almond milk came in the early 2000s and started to push out soy milk a little bit. And there are concerns about, taste and, allergens and hormonal impact of soy. So that started to decline. And then as almond milk started to scale, well, there came oat milk. And then oat milk started to increase in its category, in its space. Bottom line, consumers often have multiple different types of plant milks in their homes, and they use them for different things. Almond currently is the weakest player because of the nutrition and sustainability issues around almonds. And, it's not lost on anyone that the almond groves in California are being ripped out. They're just too, unsustainable. From every aspect of unsustainable, there's just not enough water to be able to farm them. Now, Turkey is putting in almond groves. However, there's a 7-year cycle required to plant a tree, grow it, and start harvesting almonds. So there's going to be some major disruption in that market no matter what. Our goal is to take that place and take share from almond milk. And we're already seeing that happen in cafes. This we did not expect, but the independent cafes that are bringing on sesame milk oftentimes are taking the opportunity to discontinue almond milk as well in favor of a more sustainable option that performs better in their cafes.
And I guess given almond milk is relatively mature and soy milk, is there maybe a couple of brands of almond milk there? So they can still pull off one brand, keep another one there, and then replace that with the sesame milk. So in a sense, they're not really losing. There's less shelf space for almond milk, but it's still an option.
It's still an option,
Yeah.
but it's going to collapse as a category at grocery retail slowly. It's not going to happen overnight. This is very recent data on the category. Almond milk is down 3 points year over year. So it went from 61 points to 58. Oat was at 15% of the market. Now it's at 22. Coconut went from 6 to 4. There's the soy remained about flat, right? Some remained about flat, so you're seeing the shift start to happen. But there's one key reason that oat will not be taking all of the share from almond. And that is because of the enzymatic process used to create oat milk, it also creates sugar. And so, the enzymatic process creates maltose as a sugar when oats are processed for oat milk. Yet the biggest category within plant-based milks at grocery is unsweetened. And the vast majority of oat milks cannot play there at all. And that's where really a lot of the almond milk volume is in the unsweetened varieties that literally have no sugar added and no sugar created during processing, which is the key issue with oat. So that's one of the reasons it's very important that from a sesame milk standpoint, we have both unsweetened and sweetened varieties, because that is a huge opportunity within this category.
With the sesame milk, is there anything it can't do? Can you like bake with it? Can you,
Yep.
or are there certain things where high temperature denatures the protein or does weird stuff to it or anything? Is it good in everything?
Thus far, it's worked in everything. We've got folks, we've got a restaurant in Florida that's using it in ice cream, cooking, baking, everything works quite well. Tons of folks creating recipes with it as UGC, user-generated content on social media. The only place actually we've seen it fail ever is if you have a very small amount of sesame milk in a high acid drink. The density of that can allow the proteins to flocculate or break down, which is an issue that all plant milks have with high acid beverages. And that's why, creating plant milks is so tough. They're not the same as animal proteins, and they work very, very well in most beverages. But sometimes you have a very high acid coffee or something. If you have a lot of plant milk in that beverage, it works. If you have a tiny bit, is when you see it break down. Aside from that, we've really, it's taken it's taken a lot of trial and error to get to the point where we are today. And we're constantly tweaking and looking for, better alternative ingredients or other things we can use to improve the product over time. But really, it does everything that we set out to do. And when we set out to create sesame milk at the early stage, we set ourselves very aggressive goals in terms of nutritional panel, also work from a cost perspective, the color, the thickness, and overall viscosity of the product. There are all of these different variables, and we were able to do them all at the end of the day. And then we set our targets for Barista, which is a different thing altogether, and we were able to hit all of those. But it took a lot of work, a lot of trial and error. It wasn't just that we created a formula and then boom, we were off to the races. You have to, process it the right way. You have to do it the right way every time. There are all of these moving parts in formulating something this complex. But one of the things that's been interesting to see is this really is breakthrough innovation in working with the sesame seed. And from early days, we started getting contacted by immunologists who said, look, we actually use sesame protein to treat sesame allergies or intolerances. But because there are so few uses of sesame protein in the commercial market, we're literally giving people handfuls of sesame seeds, which doesn't really work that well. So with sesame milk, they can actually use that, in very specific portions to treat sesame allergies as well. So it's interesting to be able to take a seed that is so well known, yet so underutilized, it doesn't even have an industry association. It's grown all over the world. It's highly prized. It's incredibly sustainable. It's incredibly nutritious, but it's underdeveloped in terms of human nutrition.
You mentioned the cost. How your price point on the shelf or in distribution, is it similar to the almond milks and that, or how are you pricing it? As a premium, at the same, or discount?
We're about where something like Oatly is in the market. So in the US, in the refrigerated category, there's a threshold that the retailers have seen that performs, which is 10 cents per fluid ounce. So, we had to make sure that we could get to no more than $4.99 for 48 ounces on the shelf and ensure we got our margins and everything penciled out from there. Where we're priced within, things like the food service market is comparable to where an Oatly or a more premium plant milk is, but not over that. There are some things like pistachio milk that are priced at crazy high prices and have low velocity as a result. Almond milk really, doesn't have a lot of cost to it because it really is, almond flavored water. So the protein is what actually, drives a lot of the cost involved. So they can price it like, $2 a liter. And, it's very aggressively. But at the same time, most cafes are upcharging for plant milks anyway, because the alternative dairy milks are so heavily subsidized that they're lowering costs than plant milks, and so they upcharge for them. Long story short is we fit very well into the pricing schema.
And can you give some indication as kind of what margin range you expect out of your sesame milk product?
We target a minimum of 40% gross margins at maturity. And, it can go as high as 55% across all of our products. One of the reasons I stress that maturity is it really depends on the product line where you're getting efficiencies. Something like our Mozaics chips, there aren't a lot of efficiencies once you scale, unless you're going into like Costco size bags with the product because of just how that supply chain works. On something like non-dairy milks, you're effectively paying for the labor and providing all the inputs. On something like a refrigerated non-dairy milk, you're renting very large capacity for a period of time, whether that be a day or a couple of days shift when you run your product. So you have to be able to get to the point where you're efficiently using all of that time spread across the volume that you're producing, and that you're producing enough of a single flavor to be able to hit that threshold. Because then when you do a changeover, there's product at the front and the back ends that is required to set up the line, run it, and then flush the line. If you're running 2 weeks worth of production, you're amortizing those startup and final costs across 2 weeks. If you're doing 1 day of production, you're amortizing across the day. So we may see starting margins in the high 20s, for instance, with something like a refrigerated non-dairy milk, but with a path to scaling to 40 plus with those efficiencies, where we may not see that kind of scale efficiency come out of something that's more like a packaged dry good, like a Mozaics or a RightRice.
Gotcha. And about what kind of revenue level do you have to get to sort of get the biggest gain of those, to get close to your, let's say, 40% margins on that? How big do you have to be?
It's a good question, because then you're also getting down into other areas of efficiency, not to parse, of things like, shipping refrigerated milks is expensive. And, if you're right now, we're producing our refrigerated milks on the West Coast of the US. Well, we'd be better served to produce on the West Coast and the East Coast, right? Rather than just the West Coast and trucking everything cross country. So there are a number of scaling factors, and some of that is driven by your distribution and the rest. But, once you're producing in a scale volume, I'd say, somewhere in the neighborhood of, $10 million on that product line on an annualized basis. So $10 million on a refrigerated sesame milk is a good target to start realizing those higher margins, which for us, is within a couple of years of being a reality for that particular product line on a discrete basis.
Okay, thanks.
So that is on the plant milk category. And I know we're running a little bit short of time. So one thing I just want to highlight again is how big the opportunity is in the cafe channel. So you mentioned something a minute ago, Martin, about brands, and how with almond milk, there may be a compression of space, and that may get rid of a couple of brands or limit some things, but you still get a choice. Here's the thing: when you go into cafes, you're not offered a choice of brands. It's not how cafes work. You go in and you order an oat milk latte. They don't say, okay, great. Would you like Oatly? Would you like Califia Farms? Would you like, Planet Oat? You just get oat milk. It's whatever that position is within the cafes. There's also one position for sesame milk. And once a cafe adopts it, right now we're the de facto one. But here's how big the market is. There are 65,000 coffee shops in the US alone, not counting Canada. Half of those are independents. And the independents are important because they're the fast adopters. They're the early adopters. It took Starbucks until about 2 years ago to put in oat milk. They weren't the first to market. They waited until it was proven with the independent cafes. Each one of those cafes makes about 5,000 lattes a week. That's an average number. Well, with close to 50% of those using plant-based milk, and the average latte size being 16 ounces, it's about 8 ounces a drink. Just in the US alone, just in independent cafes, just in plant milk, that's a $2 billion US market.
Wow.
It's not small. And that is actually, similar in size to the whole grocery retail market for plant milk. And this is just independent cafes, where we have a clear opportunity to be the next new thing, because a cafe will have oat milk. At this point, it's de facto. And then they may have almond and soy. Some of them don't, are really focusing in even just on oat milk. if we can displace, almond milk or come up with a category for sesame milk, then we own that. And so we've spent a lot of time really focusing on market development from a distribution standpoint to those independent cafes. And at this point, we've solidified about 50% of the U.S. In terms of regional coverage with these specialty distributors that supply the cafes with everything that they need. And by the end of the year, we'll be close to 75%. And similarly in Canada, we're at about 25% today, but we should be at about 75% coverage by the end of this year. So that is a big opportunity for us.
So you're launching consumer products in Canada later this year or early next year, but you're already here on the food service side because you don't need the bilingual, you don't need the specialty packaging. And so you're already making Canadian food service sales?
We did start in Canadian food service sales in Q3 and just starting, we did laid a little bit of groundwork. It takes an adoption cycle like everything else.
Yeah.
But you'll start to see us in grocery retailers really fast. And in significant names. And that's one of the things that's different between Canada and the US is, the Canadian market is really concentrated on the grocery side with 5 or 6 major retailers. In the US, Kroger is the biggest retailer, and even they are fragmented in terms of their coverage across the US. And you have, 200 regional grocery, retailers to kind of roll up to get to that same level of market coverage.
Yeah, sorry. I always used to be in the grocery food industry, and I'd always be surprised you go to Washington State and there'd be this small 10 chain store in the middle of Washington State you'd never heard of. And it's like, and they're big buyers and they're just spread out all over the place. So it's sort of good and bad. You've got a lot more doors to knock on, but in Canada, you've got a few doors to knock on. And if you get in, you get big coverage. But if they close the door on you, then you're locked out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the other great thing about Canada is if you get in with a big retailer, the others follow quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm still hearing of important chains. I've been in this industry for 20 years. There's still ones I haven't heard of that we start selling to. I'm like, really? Those guys have been around for 100 years. Haven't heard of them. There's just so many doors. There are, 20,000 critical, grocery doors in the US. That's a lot. And that's before you get to the mass merchandise like the Walmarts and Target of the world and the chain drugstores. I mean, there are 14,000 CVSs, similar number of Walgreens, and they all buy food. So just the amount of outlets and opportunities are very significant.
All right. Yep.
Okay, so quick on financials and growth. The bottom line is we're growing very quickly, not only in distribution, but also in revenue. And this year, we spent a lot of money, time, attention, and focus on expanding our distribution, as well as getting it in front of consumers. So with the expanded distribution, we did things like we went to 20 industry trade shows. A lot of our industry trade shows hadn't happened since 2019 due to COVID. And so there was quite a bit of ground to cover. But, we spent this year really getting in front of thousands of buyers with our products and getting things either started or moving them forward. And now next year, what we're really focused on is continuing to build on those distribution increases with velocity increases to drive more people to the products and to increase shelf turns. So, our intent is to continue, a significant growth curve ahead. And obviously there's a lot of opportunity to do so. So again, there's kind of more information on this on our presentation on our website and kind of where we're going and what we're doing to get there. But we've talked through quite a bit of it on this call in terms of that, cross-channel strategy that reinforces itself in terms of the approach to market and in getting consumers engaged with the brand. And so we'll continue to do that. One of the things we have pulled back on for 2023 is the US dollar is so strong at the moment that it's slowing our plans for international expansion, just because, the dollar is so strong, it's, hard for the countries that are interested after importing the product to be able to make the costs work. But we have seen extraordinary interest from Latin and South America in the RightRice product, for instance. They're struggling with issues on healthcare and diabetes. and it's primarily stemming from an overconsumption of simple carbs. Well, RightRice has a low glycemic index, a complete protein, high protein, high fiber, and is a great trade-off one-to-one with the long-grain white rice. So in the Asian markets, we're seeing a strong interest in sesame milk simply because, that is a population that tends to be more intolerant on an average basis to lactose and to dairy proteins, and sesame is extremely culturally relevant in their cuisine. So the opportunities are there, and we'll get to those. But 2023, we're really focusing on developing food service more across all products and across all channels. Our cap table is also here. We've recently updated it to include the convertible debt round that we completed about 2 weeks ago for about 2.2 million CAD. And so this has been updated as of yesterday if anybody'd like to take a look. And we talked a little bit about our management team, and I won't spend a lot of time on this just because, we've gone over and you've been generous with your time today, Martin. But you'll see as you dive into our management team, there's a lot of years of expertise in consumer products and in building and driving and scaling consumer brands and doing that at companies, that everything from United Airlines, where I've founded the concept of the snack box for operations. So the snack box ready-to-eat meal. I started that about 20 years ago and then took that to all the other carriers. Through to, our chief sales officer's experience building up multiple brands like Applegate, where under her watch, it went from, about 120 million Canadian sales to 600 million, going through that rapid adoption cycle at the right time. We also have a world-class board of directors, especially for a company of our size, with experience at everything from Kroger and Spins and retail grocery data, through to, publicly traded Canadian companies from our audit chair's perspective. She's currently also the CFO at Kabam, which is a Korean company. To experience with advertising and marketing with groups like Young and Rubicam. Shelley Diamond's currently the CMO of UNICEF America. And then experience with both the distribution in our industry. Amanda Helming's the CMO at UNFI, which is the biggest distributor that we work with in the US, but also a history with Dunkin' and other QSR food service opportunities, and she's helping us to develop that food service strategy. So a very, very strong senior team. So in summary, we have a huge market opportunity that we're addressing with very unique products that are plant-based, high in nutrition, and also extremely sustainable. We already have initial traction in those markets that we're continuing to scale. Our innovation provides us not only with great tasting, highly functional products that work well operationally, but also with a moat to significant competitors. It'll come someday, but we've got some time to get ahead of it. We're rapidly scaling and continuing to increase our distribution and take rate, and that flywheel is starting to turn. And we're focused on diversifying our revenue streams. So we're not entirely bound up in something like grocery, which is usually expensive, has a lot of cost to go in and support it, but other channels that help us from a cash flow standpoint, as well as additional ways to bring consumers into the products and generate trial.
All right. Thank you. I've really enjoyed that. I learned a lot here. One final question I have is, you've been public about a year, almost, like just barely a year, or hardly a year, and you've gone to market 3 times. And as you discussed, building a brand in grocery and food service can be kind of expensive. How much of a runway do you have? How much more are you going to need to sort of tap the capital markets until you're, let's say, a self-sustaining, or how much can you dial in and out the growth depending on sort of the vagaries of the capital markets and how generous they're being?
Yeah, that's something that we focus on quite a bit because, the capital markets are, a little upside down this year in terms of folks' expectations. And yet, that is where our wagon is hitched. From our perspective, we are applying all the funding that we're bringing in into, the growth and scaling. It's going to inventory, marketing, operations. For a company that's doing what we're doing, we're not actually, burning a lot of cash on the things that we see your typical consumer products company burning on. In fact, we just saw we're seeing, market comparables for other companies that are in our space burning a significant amount of cash and not necessarily making more in terms of their revenue jumps. So we are very focused on financing specifically into inventory and growth. And we have a full pipeline of innovation that we're ready to launch that retailers have already said yes to. And in some cases, they've requested it. So what we're doing, given the current market conditions, is we're charting a path to profitability within the next 12 to 18 months. And how fast we get there depends on how quickly our business migrates, even with the growth across all sectors, from grocery to more food service, because the food service brings in more net revenue faster, and that helps us to be self-sustaining faster. And then with our new innovation, we're modeling those business cases on an individual basis so we can stack them onto the base case like Legos and finance those as the opportunities come up in the capital markets for additional financing. So, we've raised money, you're right, on 3 different occasions, but we've done that quite intentionally based on, what the markets could bear at that point in time. We will need to raise more money, to finance the growth ahead. That's a good thing from our perspective, simply because, this is, real sustainable growth that we're embarking on. And, we're taking the best strategic steps that we can for our shareholders in maintaining, as much value as possible across the company while we're continuing to scale and become more important within the space. So we have big opportunities ahead. And there are companies like Oatly that still have valuations upwards of $10 billion, despite where they went out at, in kind of a very hot market, even though it's fallen off. I mean, there's that kind of interest and sustainable interest in growth in this particular space. And breakthrough innovation is rewarded with those valuations. So we still feel like, our stock is a bargain, in the current markets.
And what sort of news flow should investors be looking for over the next 3, 6, 9 months? New listings and any new products possibly being launched? New, I don't know, not geographic markets. You've already said you're not sort of focused on international right now. But just briefly, what types of news flow should we be looking out for?
So I would look out for us announcing new customers, folks who are taking on the products, not necessarily, some grocery distribution, absolutely, and those come with, slotting and the rest, but a lot of new customers that emphasize our channel distribution strategy. You'll see announcements about, Canadian expansion, as discussed, and then also things like distribution expansion into food service channels that complement, where our growth is going there. We do have new products teed up for 2023, and depending on kind of how the, capitalization and how the markets react, I mean, we have new products ready to deploy and are ready, we have customers ready to take that innovation. So, we're focused on, launching the right products at the right time with the right capitalization to ensure that those can hit the ground running. But, primarily at the moment, it's, we've got a great hand of products and a great suite that customers and retailers are responding to extremely well. So driving those, aggressively within the channel opportunities that are open to them. You think about something like food service, it's not just QSR and restaurants. We have huge interest from contract feeders, commercial food service, colleges and universities. We just announced that we had opened up distribution at the University of Chicago, across their campus into all of their cafes. It's a lot of market potential ahead. So we'll be opening up these new distribution opportunities and pushing our existing product line through them first. And then we'll be taking on, new products and things later in 2023.
All right, Julia, thank you very much. That was fascinating. And that was sure in depth. We went through a lot of material there. So thanks a lot. It was really great having you here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Martin, for the opportunity. And thank you to everybody for tuning in.
Cheers.